Members, tighten your seatbelt. The member for Murray Wellington. Collie Wellington.
Oh! All right.
I withdraw.
Call yourself.
Right to go?
Yeah, you're right to go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wow. Pretty hard to start. I'll have a drink first. I think it's not very often I get stuck for a few words, but
You'll be all right, Mick.
the
Sorry, member for Collie Wellington.
yeah, I rise this evening to make some comments ahead of my retirement and the March in the 2021 state election, and reflect on a few issues and some of the work that's been done over the last 20 years, who would believe it. And who would have thought that a young bloke born in the small town of Jurrenellan, where mum and dad
It's always going to be this hard, mate.
and sister lived in what now would be called a shack. Fran Logan, the member for Coburn, mentioned that, and I showed him some photos, and he was astounded, but had a very similar upbringing. So we share a lot in that area. And to work, mum and dad worked so hard to to support their family. And mum used to turn sleepers, which was you got on the end of a sleeper and you turn it over and the person come through and mark the sleeper so it would get passed, and then you got paid for it. Mum was about that high. She, at times, worked so hard. Oh, shit, I'm like a sook. But seriously, I'm just trying to compose myself, because memories like that, honestly, and the parents were doing it for myself and my sister. And after a time they moved to Collie because they wanted us to get an education. That was a task and a half for a person in my first year of high school. When we come into town, wasn't the most studious person, or so you could put it. And after a report card that had an average of 33%, I went back and repeated first year, and here I am standing today. Amazing, but I must say that the next year the average was 88, and I think Dad's hand across my ear was partly to do with that. Of course, you know, to be a minister also, as the first minister from the seat of Collie, or Collie Preston, which respects to Gordon Hill and Julian Grills, who both become ministers, but they lived in Collie but weren't the members for Collie. So, I suppose I'll get the other harder part out of the road first, and that's the thank yous. Up the back, kids, wife, grandkids. A lot, not all of them get here because some of them are down in the Collie, and it's a bit hard to get up this way. But Musa, Heidi, Bree, Jerry, and Stephen, John, the partners. Who let you in? 7 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. There's one of the grandchildren, first grandson. Because I had a bit of a run. I had 4 daughters and then 4 granddaughters. We thought it would never happen, and look what we got. A pretty good one. And the times that in my marginal seat where I couldn't afford to miss a function. So the family, they suffered. miss birthdays, anniversaries, the like, and I still miss anniversaries even when I'm reminded, but that's another issue. And I think one's coming up now for 47 years, I think. Nod, please. Higher, 48? 49 years of married. So thanks for the prompts up there. But, you know, it has been a tough road at times. You're living on the edge of your seat, margins that I'll talk about a bit later. But also owe a big thanks to many other people, and I'll run through these as well. Katrina Teeney, now Katrina Campbell-Fraser. She was my 2001 campaign manager. Only a kid really, now you look at it, that came down and helped me out. And the previous 2 elections, I didn't know what a campaign manager was. And then she worked through that with us under the guidance of John Cowdell, who I've got to thank for talking me into standing for the 3rd time, because he said, what if someone else stands up and wins and you're standing on the footpath, and you could have been that person? But also his generosity in time, financial generosity when we didn't have a income stream as such. Bruce Roberts, the branch secretary for many years and also the Shire president for quite some years. We'd have a lot of fun teasing the National Party, that well-entrenched Dr. Hilda Turnbull at that time. You know, she had a huge margin, but we used to have a bit of fun, and that's why we went to branch meetings to think, what could we do next to upset her and annoy her, because she used to get a bit toey from time to time. Peter Bentley, Gary and Evelyn Benton. Gary's been for, must be 10 or 12 years, the branch president, and we thank him for that. Tom Palmer, you might have heard his name now, Chief of Staff. He come back from England, and I just lost a staffer, and he fit straight in. But I must say, one time I thought he was going to kill me. I'd give him a pretty hard week, and it was around election time, and he put his hands and he goes, "Oh, for sake, just leave me have 10 minutes to myself to think." So I must have been a pain in the bum, to be quite honest. Sally Talbot, your advice in the early times was sometimes heated, sometimes not, but Sally, thanks for always putting up with me. Stanley Aros, Stan's been a long-time member of the Labor Party and has worked very hard behind the scenes, and when I needed someone to talk to, I could ring him. Christy Smith and her husband Bevan and the kids. Christy was 7.5 years my electoral officer, and yeah, she sorted the town out by herself without me being in there. I can tell you, she was tough and very focused on the job, but an absolute legend in organising the diary. And by geez, if I put one in there without asking, I copped it. John Bellini, Bill Fraser, people that have been mates and friends that are in the background. If I need a fishing trip or need a load of wood or some ding snaggers or something like that, they'll turn up along there. Rhonda Roberts, another person that has worked for the Labor Party so long and so hard for a young person. The College of Preston branch members and those in the wider Forest federal electorate area. And Ross Fern, I think maybe up the back there, Ross. I picked him up. He wrote an article. He wrote a nasty one about me one week in the Collie Mail, and the following week he wrote this an extraordinary paragraph about the town of Collie, and his writings are exceptional. And since then he come down from Collie and worked with us along the way, and now is in another office. But Ross, you're in those times when they were needed in the election time, your work was extraordinary. In more recent times, John Carney. John was a person who put his hand up to be pre-selected, missed out, and kept on working with the party. You know, you can't ask for more than that, those sort of people. Vivian Maloney, current staff, Leonie Scoffin and Stuart McGuckin. Along, I think, up there, Steve McCartney. Thanks for the support and the backstop at times. Yeah, there's been a few good shepherds to keep from me getting flattened or knocked out, one or the other. But certainly thanks for that and the financial support along the way. But most of all, if I needed a hand and ringing, And also in those pre-selection days, earlier times with Keith Peckin and Jim Davidson and all those things, the history of the AMW that's in my veins. The Collie Miners Union officials and members. The Perth office, Emma, up the back there. Put your hand up, Emma, please. I don't think anyone that's not in Parliament wouldn't recognise her. She can be a pain in the butt, there's no arguing about that. but certainly along the lines of hard work and keeping it going straight and making sure we were on track. I bet you had some sleepless nights. I can really think about that sometimes when I ring up and say we're going to do this and say no you're not, and then we'd have this big argument. But Walt, you've had to put up with it coming home and being cranky or even late because I've got all things back to front and she's trying to straighten them out. To Shay and Rhea, the kids, thank you, and thank you for your help. Michael Watts, the steady pair of hands that is needed in my office from time to time, a lot of times. Thank you. Matthew Kavanagh, a poor cricketer, but a good research officer. Clint's one of the blow-ins, he's been in and out, and I think our office could be, especially the ministerial office, could be probably tagged as a training office. As soon as we get someone going, someone else pinches them. So, you know, but Alex Hamilton, or anyone that knows Alex, there's two things she's not allowed to do when she's on the job. That's drink. The other one is only just give us an idea, Alex. Don't go into detail because I won't read it. As simple as that. Caroline Clazy, Elizabeth Went, Meredith Graham and Karen Stacey. Thank you in there. So, look, and I will run quickly through. Thank you to all the staff of the Department of Communities, Venues West, Waste, the Combat Sports Commission, the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries. I won't name any one in particular, as we've all worked together over the past few years, and it's been a great team effort. So it would be amiss if I pulled someone out of any of that department. So I'd like to thank to everyone from those 5 agencies that contributed, whether it be attending a meeting, writing a briefing note, or walking behind the scenes to keep things running smoothly. Thank you. Hansard staff, I bet I've given them some headaches over the time as well, not only by yelling, but some of the work they've done, and it's a great pleasure. I think anyone here, you know, you've had a pretty bad day and you've made a speech and think, geez, that's rubbish, and you pick up Hansard, that's pretty good. so thank you to all the Hansard staff, which I must say, some have been here longer than me. They don't look like it, but they have been. And to the parliamentary staff, up and down the passageways, you know, always pleasant. There was a time, and I've got to tell this story, when there was a couple of barmen that used to work in the bar there, and I walked in and one was doing the dishes over here and the other one's on the till, and I'd look at each other and look across and they weren't going to serve me. Sorry for what I said to you, but I was glad to see you get off your bum and do the job. But
I think you said
that
something
went around.
else too,
I'm not allowed to swear.
Okay.
But you know, the staff in behind there, you know, different people, different personalities that they put up with, I think do a magnificent job. So thank you to all them. I think Parliament itself is a bit like a bubble, and you make a lot of acquaintances, but you don't always come out the other side with a great deal of friends, or true friends. You have acquaintances, and sure, you can have a beer with them, but getting right down to where, should I say it, but you know, sometimes it's a place where games are played. And it does sadden me to some degree that it happens, and I know it happens on both sides because people talk crossways and sideways, but we're in that bubble, and it's very difficult for people who are outside that bubble to understand, you know, that we actually talk to the people on the other side in some cases because they only see what's on telly. But the other thing is about getting too involved with people that sometimes you get burnt. And I learned that very early in the process. So to anyone that's been a true friend, thank you. And I do say there's many, but there's a lot of what we would call acquaintances, and leave it at that. It's very hard for people who don't work in this area to understand that bubble and the pressure of the bubble, the pressure of elections, and on so many occasions what seems so, so simple an issue outside this bubble can be so complicated by the parliamentary process, and I think we all understand that. Mr Speaker, I think it's worth reflecting on the campaigns that I've fought over almost 30 years now. The 7 elections I've run in have all certainly been interesting, to say the least, with my first win in 2001 by just 34 votes after 3 counts. And since then, with a number of redistributions of the electorate during that time, certainly serving to make sure I kept on my toes. I've covered 9 different shires during my time as a member for Collie, in various versions of the seat that seem to get chopped up every time. Capel, Dardanup, Harvey, Collie, Donnybrook, Balingup, Boyup, Waroona and Boddington. So you can see from one end of the scarp to the other. And in one draft I had, the draft had me having half of Busselton, and I'm sure Libby put in a complaint, so I was so glad about that, Libby. But in my first election in '93, I got a flogging. It was 55% to National Party and 44% to the Labor Party. In the second election, I got a bigger drubbing, 59% to 40%. There was only 2 people in that election. There was the National Party and Labor. Libs didn't put anyone up, but absolutely got a flogging and went away with my tail between my legs for a while. But in the 2001 election, Labor got up on for myself on 50.1, with the small number of votes actually when you look at it, 5,947, and Hilda Turnbull on 49.9, so with 5,913. 34 votes, that's it, you know. It was going to be counted for the 4th time, and then they made a decision that it was all over, and it was 10 o'clock on a Thursday night when I got the phone call. Wow. Didn't know who to ring up, didn't know what to do. Went for a walk outside and come back and couldn't believe that we'd actually won. But my first caucus meeting was not actually the first Labor caucus meeting after that election, as I wasn't invited to the first one. They didn't think I was going to win. So when I did turn up, all the plum jobs are gone, and to make matters worse, Jim McGinty called myself, the Speaker and Shane Hill to tell us to enjoy ourselves for the next 4 years, as it would be the end of it, as he planned to instigate one vote, one value. So that was a really good introduction to the Labor Party, walking one door and you're going out the other. But I can say, with my colleague from Albany there, that we worked our bums off to hang on to those seats, and we're still here 20 odd years later. So Jim McGinty, suck that one up. After completing my apprenticeship as a mechanic, I worked in places such as Dampier, Port Hedland, Millstream, before starting working the underground in the coal mines, spending 12.5 years down the hole, learning to see in the dark, and then another 12.5 years on the surface in the open cut mine. It was hard work, but it was good wages and mates that you could rely on. When I was elected, it was a huge change to my lifestyle, and I even needed to buy a suit for the first time. When I come up to Perth to meet the Labor Party gang after the elections, all the photos we were taking, I didn't have a jacket. So after some quick delays, one of the orderlies was walking past down here. We gang-banged him and got the jumper off him. And I got my photo. And you'll see it now.
Wrong word, wrong word.
Hand-saddle picture, hand-saddle picture.
Gang tackled on me. And if you have a look at the photo, the sleeves are down about to here, and but I did have a jacket on. So
I think there was withdrawer in there, Hansard, and he's put another word in.
I'll correct that one. Life as a Member of Parliament is certainly interesting. And I remember one time as a borough cup at a senior sits dinner on a Christmas Eve, and the guy dropped dead sitting next to me. They were talking about one had a hip and one had a elbow operation. This guy slid down, and his sister said, "Help me," and I thought he was messing around. But he's dead. He's laying there. So I went to my best parliamentary style and got down and started to give him mouth to mouth, and heart compressions, and all of a sudden he started to wriggle and go in, and he's opened his eyes. "What are you doing?" I said, he goes, "And I don't even vote for you." And I seen him later and he repeated the same thing. "I don't know why you brought me back. I wanted to die and you go and bring me back." So you can't help some of them, I can tell you. And the 2005 election, I received 59% in the two-party preferred, which was then included Brunswick, Harvey, Waroona and Bonington down that way. But again, here comes the aeroplane. The seats have changed. The boundaries changed. I went from 9.3 to 0.04. Boom, on the bottom. So what do? You pick yourself up, dust yourself off and have another crack. And the rub is, the next election, they amalgamated 2 seats into one, and one was Steve Thomas and one was me. So here we are, he had the bottom half and I had the top half. And the election, a lesson for anyone that's going on the elections. A fortnight out, Steve was putting around, they'd got the polling, they were in front, and they put the queue away. They stopped door knocking. I door knocked right up to the morning of the election and got up by a few 400 votes in that area. So there's a lesson for anyone that's out there campaigning. Make sure that you do it right to the end and keep your name up there. The 2013 election, the Liberal Party just about sent their bank book broke trying to put me out. I've never seen so many mail-outs in my life, and I was counting them at 5. I knew how much they cost, 5,000 a pop, and they were doing 5 a week. Whew, I nearly fainted at that. But it come back to a position where I won by 56 votes. It's probably my most memorable and probably my best win in my political career, as when you look at it, the work that was done against me, there was a 6% swing to the Liberal Party in that election, and I managed to hang on, so very, very proud of that. So I must thank the Leader of Opposition, I'll see a note here, for getting me across the line with those 50 odd votes that were there, because you wouldn't commit to a police station at Capel. That's where the swing was. Thank you very much. I wouldn't have been there. But I say that tongue in cheek, you know, that's politics and it's not really. But the other thing is, in that vote, I was behind on a Tuesday, and my wife and I, we sat out the back, and once in our lives we agreed with everything, what we're going to do in our future. And then the phone rang on the Wednesday morning and said, "Oh, you're 150 in front." I said, "Oh, I don't think there was 150 behind last night, and you know, it's all over." But what had happened, the electoral officer in the collie box in the pre-polls hadn't put them in. She left on Friday, or the Saturday I suppose, after the election, come down to Perth, never put them into the Electoral Commission until Monday morning, and that swung it completely around from where I was all gone to where it was goodbye Liberal Party. So, and I do feel a bit sorry for Jamie Motion, because she got up and done her speech, her acceptance speech about winning the electorate, and it was one of Tom Palmer's final gigs, I suppose, in my office, where he said, "Can I ring him and say, are you looking at the figures?" Because the night before, the campaign manager for the Liberal Party rang us and said, "Will you concede?" And Tom said, "None of the figures we're looking at, we're just in front." He said, "No, will you concede?" I said, "No." So he had the pleasure of ringing the next day when we finally got in front to say, "Will you concede?" So that was Tom's little bit. He thought that was quite good, and so did I, to be quite honest. But another incident on when we were doing the rounds with the Premier, and we got on this bloody great bus, 3 of us, I think it was on 3 or 4 of us on the bus, went to Bunbury. We got to Bunbury and we met some people down there. The bus takes off and I'm left behind. I had to ring my wife and from colleague, come pick me up to get me home. So thanks for that, Premier. That was very good.
He was heading to Albany.
Look, I know I'm going to have to rush a bit, but the start of the election in of 2017, I started at -3 again due to another boundary change, which, as I said, at one stage it was -4 because I had a bit of Bustleton in there, but they moved it back and to get across the line by quite a large amount. But it's something that shows the faith that the Collie people had in me. 83% of the people in Collie voted Labor. And what do you say? Thanks. When I come to Parliament, look, I'll just jump a couple of pages here. Look, something I'm very proud of is in the electorate, the whole of the electorate, and I'm not picking up one part over the other, but there's been $100 million worth of spend in the electorate for schools, education and facilities such as that. So I'd like to thank all the ministers on either side for that spend, because it does mean a lot in country areas to be able to have those sort of facilities. I can walk away knowing that the kids do have the proper facilities to go forward. But there's some things that you really do worry about the speed of government. 30 years ago, I was elected, or more, 35 years ago, might have been, I got elected to local government, and my platform was, we'll fix the Collie Roundhouse and get rid of the asbestos. Guess what? It got finished last week. We've rarely moved that along. And Lake Kelwarri, one of the things that nearly got me buried after the election when I got the Premier to say it'll be ready in 6 months. Well, I wish I'd never said that, because we've got an absolute belting over Lake Kelwarri. But again, 15 years on and we're nearly there. So, you know, I don't think I'm leaving the electorate underdone, but I do thank the Premier and all the other ministers for understanding whereabouts Collie is in the transition period. The funding that's been out there, and there's been some form of criticism about that, but we do have to change. The town knows we have to change, and we are changing. And if we have a look, you know, we just had different things like the electrical licence centre, 10 jobs, relocation of frontline fire services, which the Minister talked about, heavy duty fire engine building Collie, new training centre for firefighters, and Australia's first driverless truck training centre. So we are trying to get away from where we've got to, or what we've got to do into the future. I'm also very happy to be able to say that Donnybrook got their share as well, and that card-carrying Liberal member, the President, Mr Pearce, over there. Look, we've had a great working relationship, and I mean that. He's been willing to work with us and to make sure that the town of Donnybrook goes forward. So that's really good. The Department of Seniors, look, we've worked very hard on elder abuse. We put money into that, and finally I think we're starting to get the message through that you know, it's not about a whack in the ear. Most of it's about financial abuse, and we're now getting people trained up in the banks. They're doing it themselves, and the police and those areas. So the other part that I'm very pleased about, and that is pushing money down to grassroots sport. Too often the money's been spent at the top, and you know, okay, we might get results as premierships, those sort of things, but what about the kids at the bottom that don't get that chance? We've worked very hard, and following on from kids sport, those sort of things that we've worked through to make sure that kids at the bottom get a go. There's no better place for a kid that's having problems than to be on the sporting field and working through that. So the other one is gender diversity, which has been picked up Australian-wide. The process that we put forward, that all boards should have 50% there. So I'll get through to the last bit. There's no secret, Premier, that I wasn't the #1 pick in the Cabinet. So, but to those that tried to, and there was some people that, and this is what I talk about, friends and that in Parliament, who in the early stage I had a bit of a rough start and tried to disrupt me because I had other things in there. Bad luck. You know, when old dog can bark, you can still bite. And that's to the public servants that work so hard, thank you for that. To the ones that are disruptive, go and get another job. It's simple, you know. But finally, to the Premier, I'm sure you had some doubts about my capabilities to hold in my temper at times, but I hope I proved you wrong. But I say thanks, Premier. Only got a minute, I've got to go. In my view, the divide between country and city in this state is only growing. Towns are getting smaller and regional centres are getting bigger. I don't believe there's enough consideration for country members in Parliament, and I'm sure the National Party will agree. I remember the special family nights where used to be country members had priority. That used to occur, now gone. Even today, it's impossible to bring the kids into Parliament for extended times, as there's no facilities for families to relax in after travelling up or down from the region to spend a day with partners, having a rare dinner with their family. For example, most of my family would only visit Parliament half a dozen times in the 20 years that I've been here. While regional accommodation allowance went up in recent years, that was a change that was much appreciated. This little help for members that actually want to get back into their communities. There's little help for members that want to get back into their communities at the end of sitting weeks. And if you think about extra hours I spend, take time out and think about Josie, who spends extra days because she should be able to get away and get up to those areas. And I think that's something we have to look at in the time. In my years here and travelling, I've just done just under 1 million kilometres in my travel and the cars up and down the road. I brought a few cars back in the sugar bag after using them in the paddocks for a while, but you know, it's still there. But I was able to stay in my electorate. But if I had a young family and got a ministerial job, I don't think that would be possible. And I think we've got to look at that very, very seriously. My last remarks,
I hope so.
Just with respect, Mr. Speaker, but myself and Fran Logan are probably the last of the two tradies that are in Parliament that are both going out at the same time. I asked the Labor Party to think about that. Think about, you know, the 72% of non-university degree holding Australians that shouldn't be excluded from coming into Parliament. I think it's very important that we keep the grassroots of the Labor Party in there and make sure opportunities given to those people. You know, as a tradie, honestly, what else can I say? I walk up the backyard now and look at that toolbox and faint. I don't want the grease under my fingernails anymore. But in saying that, it's been a tremendous ride, and many, many people have helped me through that on both sides of Parliament, and it's been something that is special. Again, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Thank you for your service to Parliament. I wish you well in your retirement. To the party members, I also wish you well. To those continuing, may you have a good election campaign. May you keep the election campaign out of the gutter and keep it up there so that the rest of our state can be so proud. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well done. Well done.
I had another one
Thanks
I
for
didn't
saying
use
that.
against you.
Mick, I think about that Donnybrook school.
No. It was the one when I first met you, when you come in the door.